This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Tunisia's former president Ben Ali dies in Saudi exile. Have decades of advocacy on gender equality culminated into any concrete actions in Africa? We'll tell you more. And Somalia says it's making progress in upholding rights of children. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. And tonight I'm alongside my colleague Penina, who has our business headlines. Penina.
Thank you, Richard. Coming up on Africa Live Business tonight. Ethiopia rejects Egypt's plan to operate part of the Grand Renaissance Dam. And Niger launches construction of a 2,000-kilometer pipeline to carry crude oil to neighboring Benin. I'll be back in a bit with details of those stories and plenty more, but for now, it's back to you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Penina. Welcome to Africa Live once again. Former Tunisian President Zine Abidine Ben Ali has died in Saudi Arabia. His death comes a few days after Tunisia held its second ever free presidential elections. The 83-year-old former leader had been living in exile in Saudi Arabia. In 2011, protests in Tunisia ousted Ben Ali from power. The protest not only ended his 23-year rule, but also sparked the Arab Spring. A Tunisian court had charged Ben Ali in absentia to 35 years in prison for charges ranging from corruption to torture. A military court gave him an additional 20-year sentence for inciting murder and looting. While Tunisia has had a relatively smooth transition to democracy, the economy has struggled to recover. And for more on this, we are joined by CGTN's Adnan Chouachi in Tunis. Adnan, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. Adnan, how has news of Zine Abidine Ben Ali's death been received in Tunis?
This was expected since last week because the lawyer of Zine Abidine Ben Ali and his daughter announced on social networks last week that he was in a very critical condition at hospital. And so his lawyer said that Ben Ali was at hospital in Jeddah, in the city of Jeddah, for the past 6 months, that he was fighting cancer. But people here believe that Ben Ali's death is due to illness, but also to his situation, his condition. He fled the country in 2011 and he was away from home with no hope of returning to Tunisia to stay, because if he had returned to Tunisia, he would have faced over 100 years of jail. He had been sentenced to over 5 times to 20 years in jail. So Ben Ali's death was expected, and some people here believe that he will not be buried in Tunisia. He will be buried in Saudi Arabia. His lawyer said that Ben Ali wanted to be buried in the city of Mecca, the holy city of Mecca, and that he will not be buried here in Tunisia. For the Tunisian, for the people in power here in Tunisia, for the government, for the president, and for the Tunisian parliament, they had previously expressed during the presidential campaign that they had no objection to the return of Ben Ali to Tunisia, dead or alive. But for this time, people believe that maybe he will not be buried here in Tunisia, that he will be buried in Mecca, the holy city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia.
All right, Adnan Chouachi, thank you so much for bringing us that story. We appreciate it. That's Adnan Chouachi speaking to us from Tunis. Moving on now, while the last century has witnessed the greatest advances for gender equality, several hurdles still stand in women's path. In a bid to counter this, the Commonwealth countries have pledged to ensure at least 30% of their political leadership comprises of women, a factor that came up at the 12th Commonwealth Women's Affairs Ministers meeting in Nairobi. Leaders from member countries shared the challenges they have faced alongside possible solutions. Here is CGTN's Wilkester Nyabwa with more on that.
They gathered in the numbers, prominent trailblazing women from across the continent attended the 12th Commonwealth Women's Affairs Ministers meeting in Nairobi. Here they planned to draw on their shared background as members of the Commonwealth to take stock of the current status of gender equality and how to accelerate progress in this sphere. They found that much has changed since the first meeting was held in Nairobi in 1985. In Kenya, women representation in politics has increased from 10% to 25%. And globally, women continue to rise to higher positions of power.
We have learned that progress for women and girls is progress for all. Most importantly, we are converted to the firm conviction that sustainable development can never be achieved when more than half of humanity is left out in building our nations.
However, women still continue to face several challenges in various spheres. Practices such as early marriage, female genital mutilation, and domestic violence continue to rob girls of their potential.
We all know that education has the ability to transform young people's lives. It is crucial that all girls receive at least 12 years of quality education in order to realize their rights, increase their political participation, and to open opportunities for them to secure better jobs and livelihoods.
1 in 3 women, according to the World Health Organization, 1 in 3 women are affected by domestic violence globally. That's greater than any other issue. It affects the morbidity of women and girls.
These hurdles, together with issues such as combating climate change, championing access to health and equitable economic opportunities, provided areas of robust debate. Each step they take, delegates hope, helps narrow the gender gap. Recommendations from the meeting will be forwarded to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting to be held in Rwanda in 2020. The global average of women in leadership stands at about 24%, but Commonwealth countries are determined to work towards seeing at least 30% of women in leadership positions in order to ensure that they have a seat at the table and a voice in important decisions. Wilkisa Nyabo, CGTN in Nairobi, Kenya.
All right, for more on this, we are joined by Aisha Ali, who is a writer and a feminist activist right here in Kenya. Aisha Ali, thank you for joining us on Africa Live. We're going to be asking you all the hard-hitting questions tonight.
Thank you for inviting
Well, my
me.
first question to you is, how much progress do you think has been given to gender equality in line with the Sustainable Development Goals?
Well, I feel like there has been a lot of lip service paid to it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of policies that people are trying to make in line with the sustainability goals, but there hasn't been a lot of action to implement these policies and to take up the words that people are saying. We want gender equality, we want women to be equal, we want women to prosper, but there hasn't really been a lot of work that's actually being done to show that they actually mean business and they want to do this.
Well, to your point, some say the various international instruments African governments have signed have yet to translate into positive changes in the daily lives of women, and that women remain at the bottom of the social hierarchy. To that, you say what?
Totally, completely, because even here in Kenya, we haven't even implemented the 2/3 gender rule, which is in the constitution since 2010. A lot of women, a lot of people have done a lot of work to try and make sure this is done, but it's not been done. So what does that mean? Does that mean that we are not being catered to in line with the constitution? Like, these are our constitutional rights. This is something that needs, it's not an ask, it's a demand by the constitution, but it still hasn't been implemented. So you can imagine how other instruments that have been put in place worldwide, they're not being implemented. There's the Maputo Protocol. A lot of the asks in that have not been implemented in this country. So the government, the other organizations that are involved in this are not really doing the work to implement these policies and instruments.
Okay, so Aisha, if your voice could be heard loud and clear, what areas do you think authorities should focus on to bridge the gender divide?
I think a big issue is the violence against women. I mean, we are seeing right now, we were talking about it in South Africa in the last 2 weeks when a woman was found murdered. And in the same time that people are talking about one woman, 3 other women were murdered in that same space of time. In Kenya earlier this year, when Ivy Wangeshi was murdered by a person who went and killed her with an axe, there's been a lot of violence against women in Kenya, in Africa, throughout the world. But a lot of governments are not really doing any decisive action. In Kenya, when by around mid this year, there were about 50 women who were murdered by their partners. This is important to note that this is not just murder, there's no regular murder, but I think you get what I mean. This is murder by male partners. So the violence against women from male and men is a problem. Women can't be free, women can't be equal if you're not allowed to exist to begin with. If we have to exist through violence, if we have to, we are afraid to go out, we are afraid to move in the society the way we're supposed to. How are we going to attain equality if women can't even, first of all, exist without violence? So first of all, we need decisive action on violence against women. We need governments, NGOs, women organizations to actually listen to what the women on the ground are saying. For example, earlier this year, there was the Women's March organized by a young group of feminists online on March 8th. There was very poor attendance by any of these women organizations we have in Kenya. Why? The women on the ground are saying this is the issue that we want to be catered to. We need you to focus on this, but we're not getting any support from the people who have the power and the resources to actually make a change.
All right, Aisha, so many questions, so little time, but thank you for your insights on this particular topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on, Ethiopia has been making some progress in women empowerment in Africa. Since Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed rose to power last year, more women have been appointed to key positions in the government. So what does this mean for Ethiopian women? Here are some of their views.
I believe women are much better empowered now than any other time in the history of Ethiopia because, yes, there might be issues left unaddressed, but now women are being encouraged to take leadership roles.
The Prime Minister has done a great job for women empowerment to take place in Ethiopia. We want this to continue.
I do not believe women's rights are respected in general in Ethiopia. This is because the conscience level of our community as well as their capacity of interpreting the law is still minimal. We need to do more. Legal awareness in the society is also still low.
Well, every 11 seconds, a pregnant woman or newborn dies somewhere in the world. And this is according to new child and maternal mortality estimates released by the United Nations. Now, despite the grim figure, the report highlighted that since 2000, maternal deaths have reduced by over 1/3. CGTN's Asta Tal has more.
2.8 million pregnant women and newborns die every year. Most die of preventable causes. The new United Nations report also highlights how women in sub-Saharan Africa die at a rate 50 times higher than those in more developed countries. Children under the age of 5 are the most vulnerable, with 1 in 13 children in sub-Saharan Africa dying before their 5th birthday.
Well, the most dangerous period of life is when you're being born, the first month of life. And the majority of children under 5 die within that period. 1/3 within the first day and about 3/4 within the first week.
Globally, the rate for maternal mortality has declined by 38%. According to the UN report, countries which focused on primary health care and universal health coverage saw significant reductions.
If a girl is 15 in 2017, her lifetime risk or her chance of dying of maternal cause throughout her lifetime is about half of what it was in the year 2000. Additionally, what we're also seeing is that for all women, your cause of death or what you will eventually die of, the proportion of those deaths that are now maternal, it's actually much declined as well. We're down to 9%, about 9%, down from about 26%. So we're really seeing some trends that are positive.
Malawi, Morocco, Rwanda, and Zambia were among the countries noted for a substantial reduction in child and maternal mortality. Astatal, CGTN.
Meanwhile, in Somalia, authorities have presented an initial state report on child protection. The move comes as the country seeks to assure the international community of its commitment to upholding human rights. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello has more from Mogadishu.
Less than a year after being voted into the United Nations Human Rights Council, Somalia says it's making tangible progress in upholding human rights and protecting children from conflict. Earlier this week, it presented its first initial state party report in fulfillment of the Convention on the Rights of the Child for the first time in more than 3 decades. The report comes less than 3 years after Somalia signed the Convention on the Rights of Children, becoming the 196th country to ratify the UN Convention.
We are giving priority to children, and that is our attention is there, and therefore, because the children are the future of Somalia, the future of this country. So we are getting there, things are moving. In 2015, Somalia signed the CRC Convention, the Child Rights Convention. We gave the utmost importance to the CRC, and we decided to embark into the work of the preparing the report.
Lawmakers are yet to endorse the Child's Rights Protection Bill that will, among other things, promote and protect children affected by conflict and an ongoing armed insurgency. Al-Shabaab has been labeled as the main culprit in almost each and every rights violation documented in the country, targeting both young and old. In July, a United Nations independent human rights expert on Somalia noted that militant groups like ISIL and Al-Shabaab abducted mostly underage fighters from Islamic learning centers. These children were later forced into recruitment camps, trained and later deployed to the battlefield. Mogadishu says the latest report will gauge progress made by the government in ensuring children are not used as soldiers by both the state, partner forces and militant groups.
In any country that is coming out of fragility and conflict, they go through the same path we are going through. And you have an example of Liberia, Sierra Leone. They went all, and they slowly recovering, and they are going through that. The government and the national armies are, taking back a lot of spaces. And that means that there is going to be stabilization and bringing delivery of services.
An initiative by the government to reintegrate former combatants into the society has recorded progress in recent months. Young fighters have abandoned extremist ideologies, with rehabilitation centers in parts of the country supported by the UN, allowing the government to accommodate more young fighters, giving them a chance to a better future. Abdulaziz Bello, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Well, keep it right here on Africa Live. We've got a lot more news coming your way after the break, including standoff between Zimbabwe government and doctors as strike continues. And China sends more peacekeepers to serve in the United Nations mission in South Sudan.
Data out of the country.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives. News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Patients in Zimbabwe are being turned away from public hospitals in Harare due to a doctor's strike. Doctors are striking over salaries and their missing union leader. Government has deployed Army doctors to mitigate the crisis. CGTN's Farai Wakatuya has more.
They are meant to be on the other side of the casualty ward, attending to patients, but for now the doctors are uncompromising and say they won't go back to work until their president, allegedly abducted on Saturday, is found.
We publicly denounce and condemn in strongest possible terms this display of terror and barbarism. We further warn those behind this barbaric act that ZHDA and this war membership will not be deterred from demanding a fair, just and dignified salaries for its government doctors.
On Thursday, they were given a court order to stage a protest march that had been blocked on Wednesday. While they did so, they left behind stranded patients whose circumstances are worsening with each passing day that the strike continues.
When I arrived, I was told there are no doctors. They are looking for their colleague who is missing. I have cancer and was meant to get the results of my blood tests today to check if the cancer has affected my kidneys and then begin treatment, but there is no one to help me.
A visibly distressed parent fears for his child's well-being in the deserted wards.
I am about to go in to see my daughter, but I don't know what to expect. The last time I saw her was on Monday because they haven't allowed us to visit her since then. The doctors had put a drainer in her stomach, but now I don't know if it is still safe.
He desperately wants the impasse to end.
The government must come in and assist us immediately.
For now, it's deploying army doctors into the hospital wards as it investigates the disappearance of Dr. Peter Magombei and tries to negotiate a settlement with his colleagues over pay. Farai Wakatuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
The South Africa Institute for Race Relations believes that most South Africans are more keen on getting jobs in houses rather than land to farm. The Institute is a think tank that promotes ideas and policy solutions in South Africa. The think tank released a detailed analysis of land reform and how the country can move forward from what it calls failure to success.
Many South Africans agree that the historical background of land ownership in this country needs to be addressed. But to ensure that while doing so, the economic stability of the country continues to be reinforced. More than 2 decades after the end of apartheid, most of the land is still owned by the white minority. Section 25 of the South African Constitution focuses on property rights in the country. It states that government can only expropriate land if it provides compensation. That section or policy is known as the willing seller, willing buyer policy. Land reform is one of the most contentious and highly sensitive issues in South Africa, and land redistribution has been extremely slow. The willing buyer, willing seller policy has essentially failed. Hence, the National Assembly passed a motion to review a section of the Constitution to allow for land expropriation without compensation. Many have welcomed this move, while a vocal few are rejecting it. The Institute for Race Relations is one of those.
EWC will also empower the state and not ordinary black people, because we know that it's policy right now that the land which the state acquires, whether it's by acquisition, expropriation, or in the future perhaps custodianship, is destined to remain in the control of the state. And ordinary black people will have to lease the land. They will not become owners. There's a view, I think, that Section 25 only protects white people because only white people have assets, and so it doesn't matter very much.
The agriculture sector is also concerned that since the motion was passed in Parliament, commercial farmers are anxious. Agri-SA is a federation of agricultural organizations here in South Africa. The organization believes the process is merely driven by politics.
We think this whole process, unfortunately, is being driven by politics. There are no good practical or legal reasons for tinkering with Section 25, and we agree that it's a dangerous thing to do. The problem is not the Constitution, it's not necessarily the policies or the laws, it is in fact the implementation, the budget and the corruption that is causing us not to make progress with land reform.
The two organizations are of the view that government has adequate money to rather fund new farms and farmers, to also upskill those keen on farming. Government has, however, urged South Africans not to panic about land expropriation without compensation. President Cyril Ramaphosa has over time emphasized that this matter will be handled carefully through dialogue and discussion, as land reform should be key in developing the economy and reducing socio-economic problems in this country. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Let's now head to Uganda, where calls are mounting for urgent action on tackling road safety after a spate of fatal accidents in the recent past. On average, Uganda loses up to 10 people per day in road accidents, and authorities worry that the number could rise if the road carnage continues. CGTN's Leon Sienga reports from Kampala. Let's take a look.
Uganda is facing a road safety crisis. Since the end of August, more than 20 people have died in traffic accidents on some of the country's highways. Most have involved heavy trucks and public transport vehicles. But authorities say it's pedestrians who are impacted the most.
And the reasons, absence of pedestrian facilities, especially crossings. Most of them are knocked when they are crossing the roads.
Road safety statistics show that urban areas have majorly safety challenges despite improved road infrastructure. Experts say much of the blame for the increasing number of road incidents lies in driver behavior. They say many drivers do not observe speed limits or obey road signs and traffic lights. And officials say many accidents could be avoided.
Accidents is from human error in many times. Either the vehicle has a problem, the road user has a problem, or any other thing. But those are all things that are within the domain of someone's control. So we believe accidents can be controlled. But if we don't find a way of controlling them, then we're going to continue and the numbers are going to rise.
According to Uganda police traffic reports, road traffic crashes claimed over 3,600 people in 2018. The report also shows that pedestrians were the highest category of road users killed. While there are efforts by the government to address road safety, more needs to be done.
The challenge is mindset, driver's attitude. How have we prepared these people, if at all they are to become drivers? Where are the schools? Today we are just being lucky that we have just started having certified schools, and we are just at the level of training instructors. Imagine, but how many drivers do we have on the road?
The number of vehicles on Uganda's roads is increasing by the day. It will take more commitment from drivers, pedestrians and authorities to keep everyone safe on the road. Leon Sanyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Well, China has sent more peacekeepers to serve in the United Nations mission in South Sudan. The 163 additional Chinese troops arrived in South Sudan's capital on Thursday. China is now among the biggest contributors of peacekeepers to the United Nations mission in South Sudan, with more than 1,000 troops. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
The new batch of the Chinese peacekeepers comprises of engineers and medical personnel. The troops arrive just 2 months to the scheduled formation of a unity government in South Sudan.
The new detachment of the troop will help to create a favorable condition for the future implementation of the revitalized agreement.
The United Nations mission in South Sudan has more than 14,000 troops across the country. Chinese peacekeepers are credited with provision of protection to more than 150,000 South Sudanese people who continue to shelter under UN protection across the country. The United Nations is warning that the peace deal signed between President Salva Kiir and opposition groups last year remain precarious. The world body, however, says it will continue to support the East African country in its efforts to attain lasting peace.
My friend, colleagues, the time is now. We can make a difference if we accelerate our effort to achieve the commitment made by South Sudan. a commitment that we should all fully support.
China says if peace returns to South Sudan, the role of the peacekeeping troops would change from protection of civilians from armed groups to provision of basic services and building livelihoods. The new troops coming in are expected to champion that change. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
You are watching Africa Live on CGT, and we've got your business news coming up next with Penina.
Thank you, Richard. Coming up on Africa Live Business. Ethiopia rejects Egypt's plan to operate part of the Grand Renaissance Dam. And Niger launches construction of a 2,000-kilometer pipeline to carry crude oil to neighboring Benin.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads, where opportunity meets innovation, where profitable new markets collide with global trends. From the sound of an African bell on a stock market's floor, to the shout of the trader in a bustling free market. It's colorful, vibrant, and exotic. CGTN stands at the gateway to Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. From Morocco to South Africa, we talk to the deal makers and actors who fuel its engines of growth. Only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Ethiopia has rejected a proposal by Egypt to operate a $4 billion hydropower dam that Ethiopia is constructing on the Nile. This has further deepened a dispute between the two nations over the project. Ethiopia's Minister for Water, Irrigation and Energy, Sileshi Bekele, described Egypt's plan, including the volume of water it wants the dam to release annually, as inappropriate. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, announced in 2011, is designed to be the centerpiece of Ethiopia's bid to become Africa's biggest power exporter, generating more than 6,000 megawatts. The two nations disagree over the annual flow of water that should be guaranteed to Egypt and how to manage flows during droughts. Somalia's economy is forecast to grow 2.9% this year from 2.8% last year. However, according to the International Monetary Fund, security risks and vulnerability to climate shocks could cloud the outlook. The Horn of Africa country has experienced conflict since 1991, when clan warlords overthrew President Siad Barre and then turned on each other. Over the past decade, it has been hit by famine and sporadic terror attacks by Al-Qaeda-linked militant group Al-Shabaab. In May, the fund has put Somalia's economic growth forecast at 3% and inflation projections at 3 to 3.2%. The International Monetary Fund has been pushing for better management of public finances, while the government is implementing reforms and an agreed staff-monitored program. In Niger, the President Mahamadou Issoufou has launched construction work on a 2,000-kilometer pipeline carrying crude oil from Niger to neighboring Benin. The project is funded by China.
Today, I presided over the ceremony to lay foundation for the second phase of oil exploration at Agadem oil field. The people of Niger are aware that this is a historic moment because we want to launch the biggest project of Niger's history since independence.
Clarent Mining Solutions and ChemQuest have announced a partnership that will see them create and expand a specialist mining industry lab in Johannesburg. The agreement will focus its attention on providing solutions in the copper, platinum, gold and base metal mining sectors. CGTN's Angela Kupla reports.
Countries seen as focus markets are South Africa, Zambia, the Democratic Republic of Congo and Zimbabwe.
Important for us to be close to our customers. Being in South Africa, being close to our South African and African customers, and really understanding the customer needs and really being able to respond to them immediately. So instead of getting the support from Europe, we can be dynamically and really respond as and when the customer requires us.
We want to develop products and use some of the technology we had globally. Some of the technology that's been developed in our R&D centers all over the world. Chemistries that's been revolutionized the copper industry, for argument's sake, in South America. And we want to bring some of those chemistries, some of those R&D projects, and use that knowledge to develop product for the customers in Africa.
The technology consists of developing so-called collectors that will attract the value mineral that the mine is targeting and literally floating it to the surface. Anything from platinum to gold, copper and other base metals are covered. Besides initially mining the mineral, it also covers the downstream process.
What this does bring to the table is that previously what we would consider a mine dump or waste, obviously that still contains a little bit or trace amounts of the value mineral. Our collectors are now able to allow you to collect or beneficiate your mine dumps or your effluent streams.
It seems that for sunset industries like the mining sector in some parts of South Africa, this is an extension of their lifespan and life cycle of those mines. When it comes to the rest of Africa, this is providing another solution to make mining in those countries more effective. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Plastic surgery has always been synonymous with the rich and famous, with tabloids reporting on Hollywood actors getting nips and tucks to stay young and beautiful. But over the years, aesthetic surgery has become more accessible to men and women all over the world. Pricing has become competitive and there's less stigma. However, technology has also led to less invasive surgery. CGTN Sumitra Naidu spoke to a young doctor that's embraced this industry and broken all the stereotypes.
Dr. Magudumana is young, black and female, not common in the aesthetics field. She practiced medicine for a few years before following her passion.
Aesthetics is an industry that was not very female, black dominated, and I thought, you know what, this is the time to actually get into this industry and actually open it up for the black market.
This was her greatest challenge. There was no market amongst black people.
I think a lot of the times people are intimidated by the aesthetic industry because they think of the capital they need to raise to actually start their practice. So I started in a room, and in that room I had my bed, I had my shelf with products as well as my desk. And I told myself I'll build myself up.
Dr. Magudumana feels there's still a need for education. It's not always about Botox and nose jobs. Her clients often need help with pigmentation, deep scarring, tissue damage, injuries or contusions, issues that can be damaging to one's confidence. She wants to make these services affordable, especially for these patients.
There's a lot of stereotypes and there's a lot of myths and misconceptions. So one of them is it's inaccessible. People think aesthetics is something that they cannot afford and they can't do. As Optimum Medical Aesthetics, we are trying to break those stereotypes that it is accessible, you can maintain it, and you can sustain the services. So a lot of people will think that I need to be in a particular tax bracket for me to go see that doctor. We can work with students, we can work, do you know what I mean? We can tailor-make treatments for you and your socioeconomic status. So that's what we're trying to do, to provide solutions for people. Make sure it's inclusive and to bring more African people into the market.
Dr. Magudumana believes the aesthetics industry means different things to different consumers around the world, depending on their circumstances, culture, location, market maturity and access. She's stripping it off the stigma and breaking boundaries to lift up African women in particular. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Hundreds of Huawei developers and partners are showcasing the latest devices and technologies at Huawei Connect 2019, an event held by the Chinese tech giant in Shanghai. Huawei has supported 1.3 million developers through its developer program so far, and it will invest $1.5 billion in the next 5 years to expand the program to another 5 million developers. CGTN reporter Lin Nan brings you more.
Atlas 900, the world's fastest artificial intelligence training cluster, was unveiled at Huawei Connect 2019 in Shanghai. The Chinese tech giant says both connections and computing are two key technology of its business and announced its computing strategy.
Huawei's computing strategy will focus on 4 key areas: architecture innovation, investment in all-scenario processors, clear business boundaries, and building an open ecosystem.
In a recent interview, Ren Zhengfei, Huawei's founder and CEO, said he's ready to sell its 5G technology with potential Western buyers for a one-time fee.
The security concerns about Huawei are baseless because the concerns are from those who are without 5G technologies. So at best, those are suspicions or doubts. If you can take a commercial approach to 5G networks, if it is under your control and you can develop 5G technology, I think that will help alleviate these security concerns.
Huawei estimates that the future of computing is a massive market worth more than $2 trillion and that the Atlas 900 will bring new possibilities to different fields of scientific research.
When you build an enormous radio telescope, the aim is to gather as much information as possible from the universe, and that means dealing with a lot of data.
Huawei says that computing has always been an open industry, and the company will invest more money and open up technology to encourage more developers and partners to join this open ecosystem and the global collaboration. The three-day event is an annual gathering hosted by Huawei for global industry players. This year's theme is Advanced Intelligence. More keynotes and summits will be held, aiming to build open and shared platform of technology in the following days. Lin Nan, CGTN, Shanghai.
We'll leave it there for now, but later on Global Business, we stay with the matter of the dispute between Ethiopia and Egypt over the Grand Renaissance Dam. Egypt fears that supply of water from the River Nile will be highly compromised, but Ethiopia won't allow anyone else control of the dam. I'll be having more of that discussion at the top of the hour, and I shall see you then. For now, it's back to you, Richard.
Thank you, Penina. Thank you for staying with us on Africa Live. We've got a lot more news coming your way. Don't go away. Let's take a look at the headlines. Egypt embarks on project to rehabilitate the country's architectural heritage.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Cairo has been wrestling to preserve its cultural heritage. Houses and buildings have been demolished and replaced with modern houses in recent decades. Professional restorers are participating in massive projects to protect Egypt's architectural heritage. The aim is to provide the capital's visitors with more to see than just ancient Egyptian remains. CGTN's Adel El Maroui gives us more insight in the following story.
Cairo is 1,050 years old. It has seen so many changes. Moving through dynasties of the Islamic Empire for 10 centuries, the Egyptian capital had numerous facelifts. Each has left a unique collection of architecture to testify for the glory of its period. Struggling between demolition and restoration, today many of these buildings are suffering.
The biggest challenge to preserve this architectural heritage is to create awareness among citizens who live, work, and visit these places, to encourage tourism in these places so sponsors would be interested to participate in one way or the other.
With about a quarter of Egypt's 100 million population living or visiting Cairo daily, vertical expansion is essential. In many districts, it is common to see buildings getting demolished, its land cleared, then replaced with higher constructions. So Cairo is always in a struggle with those who disregard heritage for business.
This is one of 3 buildings here in Maspero area which have defied gigantic corporations who wanted to clear the entire area to build a multi-million-dollar residential and commercial area here by the Nile. They have not only won the fight, they have dictated the architectural design for this new project.
We remove slum areas which are close to ancient sites or buildings. We never remove a heritage classified building unless it's about to collapse. We preserve whatever we find. Maspero Triangle is planned to be a massive development project. Only 3 buildings remain, and they won't be demolished because they have remarkable value. The new buildings will be planned and designed to preserve harmony in that area.
Cairo's architectural heritage is distributed over 700 acres. There's at least 3,700 buildings enlisted to be preserved as ancient constructions.
Cairo is working in more than one project to bring the unique nature of downtown buildings. In other areas, the government is removing all the random buildings built over the years. The main purpose is to convert Cairo into a city of heritage and get it enlisted in UNESCO.
The Egyptian capital has been a vital touristic destination, mainly for hosting the pyramids and the Egyptian Museum. Soon, it will be rebranded as a city of a much richer and more diversified cultures. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
A 22-year-old Nigerian lady is fast becoming one of the country's fashion experts. Founder of Rumi's Couture, Rumesa Rabiu, has successfully taken a traditional dress worn by Muslim women in Nigeria's northern region and put her spin on it, and it's now attracting women from all cultures and continents to try it on. CGTN's Deji Batmas has more on that story.
22-year-old Rumesa Rabiu begins a crucial first step in the creative process of fashion designing, sketching. She draws inspiration from the rich culture of northern Nigeria and infuses it into modern designs to deliver a head-turning outfit. She then transfers the design onto a fabric, cuts out the patterns for the dress, and then the sewing begins. Based in Kano State in northwest Nigeria, Rumesa's fashion startup Rumi's Couture specializes in making the robe-like dress known as abaya, which is popularly worn by women in northern Nigeria, North Africa, and in Middle Eastern countries.
Nowadays, abaya is used mostly by Muslim women all over the world, and is popular because of the privacy and modesty it has on its own.
Her abaya dresses are unique because of their African themes, and it's the main attraction for most of her clients outside the country. Rumesa studied education at the university, but her love for fashion and her quest for the perfect style and fit drove her to start her own abaya clothing line.
Most of my tailors disappoint me. I describe what I want, I describe the style, but unfortunately the result is not pleasing. So I just decided one day I have one of my fabric just like that, and I just decided, let me try something new. I take the risk, I just start cutting. So the result was amazing. I just wore it, I designed, I cut, and I saw it. And then later on I wore it and take some pictures.
Her sister shared those pictures online. They went viral among her circle of friends, and before long, orders started pouring in. But while those pictures did get her customers, it's her creativity that has kept them coming back.
We decided to create different colored abaya, and we decided to, specifically my company, I decided to create a hybrid clothing that can be used for both corporate and casual affairs.
Since 2017, Rumi's Couture has been catering to working-class women and entrepreneurs below 55. But it's not been a walk in the park for Rumesa.
From the beginning, I just went into the business without knowing, without doing research. I thought I would just have the fabric and just sew it and sell, and that's all. But when I put one step into the business, I realized that there is so many things to do.
As the fashion business continues to grow, so does the number of people working for her. She now has about 10 tailors and apprentices all working for her and earning a living. And regardless of her challenges, her digital marketing efforts are paying off. Rumeysa says patronage of her brand has been increasing exponentially. She records about 10% more sales every month and says she's proud of showing off her heritage through design. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Kano, Nigeria.
And we're not done just yet. We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Here's a look at what's ahead. Paris 2024 joins forces with Dakar 2022 in a new form of international cooperation in the Olympics.